Thank you, Leos, for giving me this platform today to share my thoughts. I, Dhanaja Weerasekara of the Leo Club of Battaramulla Synergy, would like to talk to you about the pretty vast topic, privilege, under the theme of the month, youth. Honestly speaking, this was a topic that came to me while I was talking to some peers of mine. And it got me thinking, what is privilege? Is it even real? I mean, we all have our own unique sets of personal struggles and challenges to overcome in life. What makes another person more privileged than I am? The Cambridge Dictionary defines the word privilege as a personal advantage, immunity, right, or benefit granted to an individual or group of people. An interview with the YouTube channel As Is in 2015, one of the interviewees famously said, "Some people are born into families where they have to walk miles just to get water. All I have to do is turn on a faucet. That is privilege." One may categorize privileges into 5 main categories. Please note that I am speaking in a global context here, but from the top of my head, there is white privilege, religious privilege, gender privilege, heterosexual privilege, and socioeconomic privilege. Having a privilege means having an advantage that is out of your control, and you didn't really ask for it either. So it's extremely hard to acknowledge that one's own privilege because it is the flip side of oppression. To speak briefly and expand on the 5 types of privileges that I explained before, I'd like to start off with white privilege. So white privilege is predominantly seen in the Western world, like US, Europe, and such countries, as well as at the African region, especially South Africa. In the Western world, white privilege benefits Caucasian people at the expense of people of color. This is deeply rooted in the concept of colonialism when the British invaded majority of the US and Africa and the like. Speaking of the situation of white privilege in the current world, I think many of y'all could remember the Black Lives Matter movement. So this is the result of centuries of oppression and disadvantages being provided to the Black community in the US. Moving on from white privilege to religious privilege. Religious privilege basically includes the ability to find a place of worship near you, and it also includes the ability for one to feel a sense of connection between their religious celebrations and the wider society. A prime example of this would be being able to enjoy a work holiday on one of your religious occasions. In the context of Sri Lankan society, I feel that, by law, at least, I'm not sure about it being in practice, but at least by law, we have religious freedom for all religions across the Sri Lankan society. But when you look at our day-to-day lives, you could definitely see that certain communities are marginalized in the way that they are allowed to practice religious freedom, especially when you consider the freedom to dress the way you want to according to their religious beliefs. And also, you cannot deny that there's a majority benefit, especially when you consider in the way that certain practices in law have been formed, and in the way that general society moves, and the way people try to understand someone who's not from your own religion. So I feel like it's very, very prevalent, especially in Sri Lanka, even though we have laws to protect minorities. I feel that we have a very, very long way to go in terms of acknowledging our religious privileges, especially with the majority. So from covering up that topic, then we have gender privilege. So gender privilege is usually referred to as the male privilege. While to me, I guess I personally feel that the current patriarchal society actually fails both men and women. It fails to address the most pressing issues faced by women, like the gender pay gap and the lack of access to sanitation, which tends to be lost in the hashtag girl boss movement that we have going around these days, which actually, if you really look into it, it's actually idealizing the empowered woman who is often seen donning a more masculine persona. Always, if you look closely at all the empowered posts that you see, all of them, none of these women are shown in traditionally feminine roles. Like if you look at all the girl boss posts, you can see that almost none of these women are shown in like traditionally feminine roles, like, you know, being a housewife or like taking care of children, all of that. And that's actually really interesting and sad to see that, you know, that the current movement of feminism and like female empowerment is going down a train where they, in a way, look down on femininity and then encourage females as well to channel their more masculine persona. But I mean, that's like a totally different topic. But going according to the point that I said before about gender privilege and like the fact that the modern girl boss movement is not showing the real situation of women around the world, I just wanted to add on to the point that majority of these empowered women that we see on television and on movies and things like that, majority of them come from a privileged socioeconomic class. Majority of them come from like middle to upper middle class families. So again, the access they have to certain resources, there is a disparity in that, which leads to my next point, which is socioeconomic privilege. So this is again a topic that's close to a lot of people's hearts because what is socioeconomic privilege? Honestly speaking, the concept of a socioeconomic privilege is something that's genuinely hard to explain, because socioeconomic privilege is something that looks different to everyone. For some, it might be the ability to the ability to buy luxury items, while another cannot. And for others, it's basically the inability to have the very, very basic needs in life, like having a roof over your head covered. So, especially in the the context of the current world with the COVID-19 pandemic, I feel that the majority of the world is basically feeling the impact of the financial blows that the virus brought, along with the layoffs and like the economic downturns it cost businesses. But if you've managed to get through this pandemic with, even if it's not your usual income, if you've managed to get through it with food in your table, I think there's a level of social economic privileges that you need to acknowledge as an individual. And moving on from socioeconomic privileges to the last and final privilege, which is heterosexual privilege. This is definitely one of the most controversial, more taboo topics to talk about. But the right to exist and the right to learn about your rights and the right to exist, basically, is, I think it's something that's important to people of all sexualities and sexual orientations and gender identities. In speaking of Sri Lankan context, the situation for people who don't identify as cisgender straight is pretty dismal. There are very little laws protecting them, and unless you have had experience of being harassed or being denied at public places, you will not really understand the level of privilege that being cis and straight in Sri Lanka. And I feel that this is not something that's unique just to Sri Lanka, but around the world, people who identify as heterosexual or part of the LGBTQA plus spectrum are being denied of their rights. And actually, I think one of the most horrific incidents that I could recall in recent history is the Pulse nightclub shooting, where 50 innocent people were shot dead at a club somewhere in the US. I don't remember the location exactly, but all of them were innocent, and their only crime was identifying as non heterosexual. So, looking at the scope of things, that is the 5 privileges basically summarized. And I think one of the key features you can see in all 5 of them is that the majority of them are things that you cannot control. They're things that you're born into, and it's something that people would find uncomfortable to acknowledge. But I think the more people are sensitive and the more people look in and identify the level of benefits and like the way society is basically being constructed to benefit one person and not the other, I feel when you look into that, we as a society would probably move forward together better. Especially since now we are all Leos and we are working to improve society for the future. And I just need to add on that these are just like very rough summarizations of some 5 main privileges. And in addition to these, along as the years have gone by, people have started to identify different levels of different privileges as well. So there is a new privilege that I've been hearing about recently called pretty privilege. And I think this is something that came up after the incident where a young teenager, I believe, had run over a mother and child. And basically, this young convicted criminal was being praised online for his appearance, and many were pushing for a lighter sentence for him, basically considering his appearance. So, stuff like pretty privilege have like no exact grounds, but I just wanted to acknowledge the fact that the 5 privileges aren't conclusive, and it is always expanding. So to conclude, I think my probably 10-minute long speech, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for providing me this opportunity, and I hope you all took away something important. I'm not like a professional public speaker, but I hope my speech was bearable. Thank you.